You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week it was 2 bye weeks for Utah and Utah State, and BYU played a Friday night game that I'm sure many of them would like to forget. I'll go over that game, my thoughts on it, and I delayed recording this episode so I could see where the polls would place BYU after that performance, and clearly nobody on the polling committees, or I'm sure in the College Football Playoff Committee, watches games past about 9 p.m. Eastern. So I'll talk about my thoughts there. I'll also talk about the surprising surge from Real Salt Lake and where they are positioned going into the final 2 games of the season, and a little bit to talk about the Utah Jazz. Yes, I know. I said I would not talk about the franchise until they committed themselves to trying to win, but it is still major stuff that I do need to talk about here in Utah, so I'm going to talk about it. And that'll be the episode. There might be some gaming talk towards the end, but before we dive into everything, thank you all so much for being here. If you could do me a favor. Well, I guess give me a favor would work too, wouldn't it? Whatever your flavor and translation of what I tried to say there is, please give me that like, comment, subscribe, wherever it is, however you listen. And the one challenge I have for you, Spelunkers, is to share this show, this program, with one person that you think might like it. I don't need you blasting me on social media, although that would be very kind of you. Just give it to one person that you think would enjoy the talk of Utah sports, unedited, unabridged, unafraid of what's really going on, and a little bit of video game talk. So please do that for me and just continue being awesome. You know, Gifford Pete and Angela Hammond, all of you out there, you're great. Continue being your awesome selves, and let's get into it. So let's start with that Friday night game between West Virginia, traveling out here west. Yeah, West Virginia's not all that west. Maybe they should change their name. I don't know. West Virginia traveling out west to Provo for the first time, and in Big 12 play. The game went really well to start, in all honesty. At one point, it was 28-10, feeling good, looking good, not terribly too many embarrassing mistakes, but Jack Kelly getting hurt, and in the nature and the way he walked off the field and how he was on his back for a very, very long time. That took the air out of the stadium, and it took the air out of the game. And then not only was Jack Kelly injured, Kalani Sitake and crew pulled Isaiah Glasker as well, so he is a part of the walking wounded. That includes basically the entire running back room, not named LJ Martin. So the injuries are starting to pile up in a way that they didn't really last year. And that was part of the calculus and me in my projection of where BYU was going to finish on the season. If you remember going back to my preview, it was 6 to 7 wins, maybe 8, depending on the maturation of Bear Bachmeier and how Aaron Roderick could adapt his offense to what the kid could do well and avoiding the more complicated plays. It also took into account that there is more depth than there has been in the past, but these two guys, Isaiah Glasker and Jack Kelly, are NFL talents. You can't just replace them. The only place that can do that is Georgia. Not even Alabama can do it anymore. So when you look at that and you lose 2 key players like that, the defense is going to struggle, and boy, did it struggle in the second half. They didn't have an answer for Khalil Wilkins, the running quarterback. The bugaboo that BYU has always had is defending against a running quarterback. You name the running quarterback BYU has gone up against, that particular quarterback has probably put up a lot of points. So they lost a lot of pressure when it came to Glasker and Kelly, because as we've seen throughout the season with Jack Kelly, he's usually spying the quarterback, and as soon as the quarterback breaks contain, he is shot out of a cannon going straight at that quarterback. So losing that is a big deal. There's not a guy that BYU has other than Isaiah Glasker that has that sort of impact. So we'll see how long Jack Kelly's going to be out. When he was on the field and they were looking at his shoulder and his neck, I was hoping it was a stinger. It was not. it was something more serious. He was in a sling for a while. Towards the end of the game, he took the sling off. I don't know if he just did that on his own or if the training staff allowed him to, but that's a huge loss. A humongous loss that cannot be understated enough. Kalani Sitake and crew are going to downplay it. They're going to say it's next man up mentality. We are ready for this. Our guys are prepared for it. And we proved against West Virginia, blah, blah, blah. They didn't prove much to me. The quarterback was starting to get out of control. The pass rush was not hitting home. And it was not a good look going into a game against Noah Fafita, who, while he is a short quarterback, he's about 5'9", 5'10", he's still a very good quarterback. In 3 quarters in their game this past week, he threw 4 touchdowns. So I'm nervous heading into this Arizona game. It is down in Arizona, and I'm nervous for the first time for the defense, not necessarily for the offense. Arizona's defense is not that great, so I'm not really worried about that. But let's circle back to the West Virginia game. Bear Bachmeier looked fantastic. He did. I was impressed, both by his play and by Kalani Sitake and Aaron Roderick just saying, grip it and rip it, kid. Go. And he did. He hit Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston for 3 huge plays. He made a fantastic read on a run pass option deep in their own territory where he pulled it out of the gut of LJ Martin, hit Chase Roberts, in stride. And if Chase Roberts didn't run out of steam toward the end, that was a touchdown. So I was very impressed with that. The mistakes that he made were freshman mistakes. I mean, those are the ones I was expecting earlier on in the season. That didn't happen. They happened against West Virginia. It led to 2 of their touchdowns because it was like a 3-yard field and a 10-yard field or something like that. The interception was just a good play by West Virginia's defense. It wasn't necessarily a mistake on Bear Bachmeier's part. It was a tight end screen in the middle of the field. Bodies are flying everywhere. And the linebacker for West Virginia just read the play very well, stepped in front of the pass and picked it off. I wasn't really angry at that play call. I wasn't angry at Bear for throwing it. It was just a really good defensive play. I was just like, all right, when that happens, you tip your cap to the defense and you just go next series. The option play, Andre Ware broke it down perfectly on the broadcast. You need to pressure the defender that you're running at as the quarterback before you make your decision to pitch or keep. In that particular instance, there were 2 defenders. Bear thought he was close enough to one, but there was the other one that flashed out that batted the ball away for that fumble. Again, freshman mistake. If he held onto it for a microsecond longer, he would have seen that second defender flash, and he would have just kept it for like a 1-yard loss. So learning opportunities for Bear. I'm not mad at either of them, just freshman mistakes. When you get more experience, he has that experience now, it won't happen. And the first mistake wasn't really his fault. It was just a really good play by the West Virginia defender. So what I want to highlight is the other mistakes. First, the fumble from Jovessa Demooney. Sitake, I know you play the best player that you think. I know you say you don't care their age, you don't care their experience. If they show up in practice, they're going to show up in the game. But this is conference play. You're not an independent anymore. You're not playing Western Kentucky. This is West Virginia. Yes, they are having a down year, but it's still a Power 4 conference opponent. Young guys are going to get punished. Bear Bachmeier is an outlier for the moment. Jovessa Demooney did not cover the ball. He just, I don't know what he was thinking. He didn't cover the ball fighting for a first down. He should have just went down. He had the first down. He didn't need to fight for more yardage. And he fumbled the ball, which allowed West Virginia to score a touchdown. That's on coaching. The other major mistake I want to call out was from one of the associate captains, Keanu Tanavasa. Down in the red zone, West Virginia had the ball. It was a 3rd or 4th down stop. The quarterback was down on his knees. The whistles had blown, and then Tanavasa comes out of nowhere and levels the quarterback in the back. What? Everybody else on the field had stopped, and this guy just goes flying in and hits the quarterback in the back. That's coaching, but that's also just an idiotic play. So I also want to call out the penalties for BYU. This is a problem this year. Last year, it wasn't that big of a problem. BYU was not very penalized last year. But this year, big time problem. They had 10 penalties accepted against them. There were 12 called. 10 penalties for 67 yards. One of them almost led to a score if it weren't for a goal line stand from the BYU defense. With Tonavasa on the sideline, by the way, when that happened. There were no sacks in the game for either team. And I don't know. It's really tough to read on the BYU side of things. For West Virginia, I mean, they're playing backups most all over the field. So they're just figuring out who fits Rich Rod's new offensive scheme, who doesn't, and that's what they're doing this year. For BYU, you have your scheme. It's been in place for a decade, really. You're giving up bad penalties. Towards the end of the game, I know there were more young guys in the game because the score was almost out of hand, but they were slicing up that defense in a way that made me very worried for the Arizona game. So this was a good win, 38-24. That's a misnomer. There was a garbage time TD for West Virginia when they had their backups in against BYU's backups. So, I mean, the final score is always going to be the final score, but it was more like a 21-point victory for BYU. That's a good win, but there were so many mistakes. Lots of opportunities for coaching, as Kalani Sitake likes to put it. Third down efficiency is another thing I want to point out because a lot of broadcasters talk about it with BYU. A lot of sports writers talk about it. For BYU, third down efficiency is not really a stat you want to look at just because Kalani will always go for it if it's 4th and 3 or shorter. He always will. So if it's a 3rd and long or 3rd and medium, the goal is not necessarily to pick up the first down. It's to get enough yardage to make the decision easy to go for it on 4th. Because if you look at the 4th down efficiency from BYU, 4 for 4. They were 3 for 3 when it wasn't a trick play. So that's something I want to call out and for all of you to kind of hear when you're listening to these broadcasts talk about, well, their third down efficiency isn't best in the conference. There's a reason for that. Sometimes they bring it up. Andre Ware brought it up. He said, well, when the play-by-play guy talked about it, he said, well, with BYU, it's not necessarily getting the first down on third down. It's just getting close enough to go for it. So that's really what it is. And I want you to be the educated fan so that you can explain that and just look. And when you hear that stuff from the play-by-play guy, roll your eyes and go, that's such a stupid take. That's a lazy take. And that's what it was. So that's the game for BYU this past week. It was a solid win. It was almost spectacular in the way the Bear Bachmeier played. Rich Rodriguez, the head coach of West Virginia, just said, we made him look like a Heisman winner in the first half, so just give him the Heisman. Obviously, that was tongue-in-cheek. There's no way that he actually feels that way. But Bear looked really good through the majority of the game. I was very impressed. The schedule is only going to get more difficult from here. Colorado just lost to TCU by a couple of touchdowns. They gave up 21 points in the fourth quarter to TCU, so Colorado's not very good, which is too bad. By the way, get well soon. Coach Prime, he's dealing with blood clots in his legs that are causing him severe pain. Man. And as you all know, I love Coach Prime. I do. I'm fully in his camp, so. And then the other wins, like East Carolina, okay. And then Stanford. I mean, we don't really know what this team is, but we're heading into the teeth of their schedule now. And it starts with an Arizona team that is better than a lot of people thought. A lot of people had Arizona towards the bottom of the conference, but they only have one loss on the season. They've looked pretty good. Noah Fafita is really actually showing like he's an actually good quarterback, and it wasn't just Tetaroa McMillan from last year, the first-round pick. So you have that game against Arizona. Then immediately after that is the Holy War. And as everybody knows, anything can happen in that game. Anything can happen in that game. It's impossible to predict. Unless it's like BYU's national championship year. Even then, it wasn't it wasn't a blowout. Like the only blowouts that really happened were Urban Meyer, the 5 interception game from Max Hall, and the Ty Detmer Heisman winning year. Those were like the only blowouts. So who knows what's going to happen there. And then immediately after that, they have to travel to Ames, Iowa against Iowa State, whose offense is reeling, but I'm sure they're going to figure it out by the time BYU comes to town. And then they have to travel after that to Texas Tech. Top 10, by the way, Texas Tech. And then at home against TCU, a very good TCU team, and a surprisingly good Cincinnati team after that. And then they wrap up the season against Central Florida, which by all intents and purposes, if BYU is like 90% healthy, they're going to win that game. So we'll see what this team is made of. We'll see if Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker can get back and be healthy soon. It's going to be crucial against Utah if they're not there. Those two guys would be able to keep Devin Dampier in check for the most part. I'm not saying they'd shut him down, but it would be a more fun game to watch. So BYU gets the win. I'm not happy about the result. They are sitting atop the Big 12 Conference, tied with Texas Tech, Arizona State, and Cincinnati, all at 2-0. And then Utah is sitting tied for third behind Iowa State, Baylor, and Kansas because Utah is 1-1 in conference and they've had a bye week. So, yeah, overall, it was a win, but it wasn't that convincing for me. Now let's talk about the AP polls because I wanted to kind of wait and see because of the chaos that happened this past weekend. And if you've been listening to me for a while, you know I love chaos when it comes to the top 25, especially the AP poll, because the AP poll is full of themselves. They figure they can predict the season before anything happens. And especially now in the era of the transfer portal, NIL, and all that stuff. That's why these outlets hate NIL. That's why they hate the transfer portal, is because they can't predict it as normally as they have in the past. So it disrupts their models, their computer models, all this other stuff. And so they hate it and they rail against it. You know I love the transfer portal. Power to the players, all that stuff. The old GameStop motto, power to the players. They're the ones who make the money for these people. So I love it. So with the chaos that happened this past weekend, Texas losing to Florida, a 1-3 Florida team, Penn State traveling to the Rose Bowl and losing to a winless UCLA, hey, that win looks pretty good now for Utah, right? By the transitive property, Utah beat the preseason number 2 team in the country by the transitive property. There you go. So Texas and Penn State, number 1 and 2 preseason by the AP poll, fall out. And we're not even halfway through the season. Yeah, I love that. I love that. So they fall out. Vanderbilt loses to Alabama, predictable, but, I mean, the Chaos Goblin in me would have loved to have seen Vanderbilt beat Alabama just to see steam come out of the ears of that ESPN guy who I will not name because I loathe him, who, by the way, is thinking about running for the Senate? Oh my gosh. I'll just call him Mr. Ears. You can figure out who I'm talking about. I can't stand him. But just to see the steam come out of his ears, maybe he would have an aneurysm. Who knows? If Alabama lost to Vanderbilt for 2 years in a row, I would have loved that. Anyway, I digress. So the chaos around BYU really helped. Really helped. Teams like Iowa State lost, Vanderbilt lost, Texas, Penn State, Florida State lost. So we look at the rankings now, and not necessarily because of anything BYU has done, but because of what's happened around them, they jumped 5 spots. Other teams that jumped 5 spots are the ones all around BYU too. So teams like Missouri, Michigan, Notre Dame, Illinois, and Virginia all jumped 5 spots. And then Arizona State also jumped 4. It's very fun. I'm loving this. I may as well be sitting in a McDonald's recording this episode because I'm loving it. Like I said, though, BYU hasn't really played anybody, and they're about to hit the teeth of their schedule in a major way. I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of losses in there, especially against Texas Tech. How they shut down Utah. Utah's a good team. They are hot and cold, but they're a good team, and they made Utah look bad. And they've done the same thing to everybody else they've played this year. So that's why they're a top 10 team. So as we move forward, BYU is going to have to show us something. But if they just keep plodding along and winning ugly, I'm going to have to shut up and just be like, hey, it's a win. And I'll be happy to at that point. But I just wanted to call out the chaos of the polls because of every team losing. I love it. So in the top 25 right now, the undefeated teams are 1 through 7. And then Texas Tech at number 9, with Alabama being number 8, frustratingly, because they lost to Georgia. Georgia's top 10 as well, with 1 loss. Ugh. LSU is 11 with 1 loss. Please, LSU's not that good. Anyway, Georgia Tech, Missouri as well are undefeated, and then BYU. and then Memphis down below them at 23. So really fun stuff. Really fun stuff so far early on in this college football season. The air quotes experts out there for the national media writing and Paul Feinbaum don't know what they're talking about. And they're just homers. Like yours truly. That's really what it boils down to. All right, now let's move it along. I talked way too long about BYU there. Let's move it along to Real Salt Lake. They won against Colorado. A key game, a 6-point game. And they won at home in the rain, in the mucky muck, 1-0. And don't look now, they're sitting 9th. That is in the playoffs. That's the playoff game, or the play-in game to get into the playoffs, where they would be facing against FC Dallas. Diogo Gonçalves, the guy I called out a couple years ago as being the breakthrough guy, well, he scored a key goal in this one against Colorado Rapids and U.S. men's national team hopeful goalkeeper Zach Steffen, who once kept goal. I'm going to go with kept goal for Manchester City. So he's pretty good. And Real Salt Lake, don't look now, might make the playoffs after all. They've got 2 games left. And the reason why I'm kind of bullish now after being bear for a very long time is because, for one, they'll be playing against a Seattle Sounders team that really has nothing to lose or gain from this game. They currently sit at 49 points, 4 points behind LAFC, and 5 points above Austin. So they are pretty much locked into their position. Who knows how they're going to handle that game? The mentality of it. It is at Lumen Field, which is in Seattle, which is where Real Salt Lake just doesn't win until last year. So we'll have to see what happens there. But if Real Salt Lake gets the W, they're pretty much in, because their final game of the season is against St. Louis City SC soccer club. And the St. Louis City is the 3rd worst team in the Western Conference. Again, I'm going to go with the Dumb and Dumber Jim Carrey. So you're telling me there's a chance? That's where I'm at with Real Salt Lake. I'm still not sold, but it could happen. They have the player that can make it happen in Diego Luna. He is that good. He can take over a game, and that's rare. And I'm shocked that he is still with Real Salt Lake. My prediction now is that he's going to be gone in the January transfer window. But I don't know what's going on there. Maybe Real Salt Lake is asking for too much for once. But that's where Real Salt Lake stands. They currently sit at 40 points. They are above Colorado on head-to-head as well as goal differential. And really, it's in their hands. They win out, they're in. Which as a player is always the best scenario because you don't have to think. It's we win, we're in. That's where Real Salt Lake is sitting. So it's very exciting. Unfortunately, nobody will be able to watch this because it's on Apple TV, and nobody has Apple TV. Don Garber, you stink. For those of you that don't know, Don Garber is the MLS commissioner. He would be the worst commissioner in sports if Rob Manfred and Gary Bettman did not exist, but here we are. All right, let's move on. We're moving on. I'm moving quickly now to the Utah Jazz. Yuck. Yuck. I'm not going to talk about this team. I'm not going to talk about this franchise very much during this season unless they somehow miraculously turn into a team that is a playoff contender. Spoiler alert, that's not going to happen. Austin Ainge, King Nepo baby, has said they're not going to be actively trying to lose. Great. Your team's not good enough to win. So you can trot out Lauri Markkanen out there for 82 games. You're still going to win 17. Walker Kessler still doesn't have a deal, so he's going to be traded unless they can somehow strike a deal. But he has been outspoken about losing, and he hates losing, and he's tired of it. I mean, if you sign a contract with Utah, Walker, you're locked in for another couple years of losing, and losing bad. The average age, by the way, of this team, 25. Yeah, 25. If you take away two of the guys that I don't think are going to make the roster, that knocks them down to 24 and a half. The two guys being Georges Niang and Kyle Anderson. I don't see those guys making the roster. Who knows what we're going to get with Ace Bailey? 4 teams passed up on him. Could have drafted him. Who knows what we're going to get out of Walter Clayton Jr.? Everybody says he's a winner. He's mature. Obviously, he's mature. He's 22. It's so weird saying that. But in basketball, that's mature. Coming out of college. And then, we still have guys that are busts. Cody Williams is a bust. Bryce Sensabaugh is a bust. Neither of those guys should have been drafted where they were. There's a reason that scouting department's gone. And there's a new director of scouting. There's a whole new scouting department that was hired. It's because they were terrible at their jobs. Just look at the roster. And then you have guys like Zvai Mikhailuk, who's taking up a lot of minutes. Why? Yusuf Nurkic is going to be playing a lot of minutes. Kevin Love, for some reason, is still on the roster and they haven't bought out his contract. I don't understand that. So this team has a bunch of first-round busts on it. A bunch. And they were all drafted by the Jazz. Taylor Hendricks, the jury is still out on this kid. He had a very promising start to the season last year until he had that gruesome injury. We'll see how he bounces back. He's been working hard ever since the injury. Like the day after his surgery, he's been working to get back on the court. We'll see. He could be that guy, but Isaiah Collier, I mean, he did break John Stockton record, which is no easy feat, but he had a ton of turnovers to get there. I don't know what we have in him. Kyle Filipowski is a stretch 4 at best. Off the bench, maybe some offense. And you just look at the rest of the roster and you just go, where is it? Keontae George has plateaued. I mean, I think he is the player that he is in a Utah Jazz jersey. If he goes somewhere else, he could probably get better. But in the system that is run by Coach Hardy, I don't see Keontae George growing. He's plateaued. He's a number 2 guard. He's a shooting guard in a point guard's body. And that doesn't work well in today's NBA. It just doesn't work. And I'm just very frustrated by everything this franchise is now, by everything it claims it wants to be, but it just does the exact opposite. I think Danny Ainge is just collecting a paycheck now, and he just got his son a sweetheart deal. Nepotism showing up very well. And then them with the messaging that they have just makes no sense. We're going to try to win. We're not going to try to lose. Fantastic. Look at your roster, Austin, and tell me, how many games do you think you're going to win? If it's above 20, you're wrong. So I'm very angry about this whole Jazz rebuild. I'm very angry with how it's all worked out, how the scouting department was just garbage. Like, not even dumpster would take them. I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you, Splunkers, other than I'm just angry about it. I don't like where the Jazz are headed. I don't like the messaging they have. And then let me also tell you something. Those ticket prices are not going to come down. They're just not going to come down. So enjoy overpaying for crappy basketball. Really, what you're paying on those ticket prices is to see the other team come beat up on the Jazz. That's really what you're paying for. And if those veterans get any sort of advanced minutes, the ones that they traded for and signed, like Kyle Anderson, Kevin Love, Georges Niang, Yusuf Nurkic, if they get any sort of meaningful minutes, oh man, that's going to be an episode. I'll tell you that much. That'll be an episode. So there we go. There's your season preview, I guess, for the Jazz from the Matt Cave. It's going to be a bad year. It's going to be a bad 10 years. It's just, and then they talk about all of the draft capital they have. They don't. Great. If you can't scout and you can't draft and you can't develop, who gives a crap what your draft capital is? It's like buying stock in Enron. What? So that's where we're at with the Jazz. I'm done. So that's the episode this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. Not enough time left. I rambled on too much about BYU and about the Jazz there to get some video game talk in here. So next week, I'll have my Borderlands 4 review for you in full. And thank you all so much for being here. And I'll see you next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.